It was supposed to be his last night alive. The chains were cold, the room was darker than usual, and outside the cell the guards stood still as statues. Peter was not new to prison. He had tasted the silence before. But this time it felt final. No court hearing. No defense. Just a death sentence and the ticking breath of night pressing against his chest. It's strange, isn't it? How sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from a sword, but from silence, the kind that whispers, "This is the end." But what if that same silence is the setting for divine interruption? What if the night you give up is the night God shows up? Hey friend, welcome to Midnight Psalms. This is a space where the night doesn't mean absence, it means anticipation. We tell stories of how God moves in the dark, when no one's watching, when no one believes it's still possible. If your soul is weary and your night feels long, you're in the right place. Because sometimes all you need is one story, one spark of faith, to remind you that heaven doesn't sleep. So get comfortable. Let your heart breathe. Let's walk into this night together, and see what happens when chains don't get the final word. Peter was guarded by 16 soldiers. That's not just protection, it's paranoia. Herod had seen what happened the last time someone tried to hold down the movement of God. So this time he doubled the watch. Chains on Peter's wrists. Chains on his feet. But not a single chain on his faith. The cell may have been dark, but his spirit wasn't. He didn't try to escape. He didn't argue. He slept. Not just any sleep. The kind of sleep that only comes when you've surrendered your story into greater hands. While fear paced the corridors, peace laid beside Peter, wrapping him like a blanket. That's what faith does. It lets you rest in places where others collapse. And then, light. No thunder. No earthquake. Just light. It pierced the prison cell without warning. An angel stood by Peter, not announcing, not performing, just standing, shining. The chains? They didn't argue. They fell. The guards? They didn't even wake. Isn't it wild how God doesn't need permission from your environment to change your outcome? He doesn't knock, he walks in. And when he moves, even metal remembers who made it. Peter didn't even know if it was real. That's how good God is. Sometimes the miracle is so tender, it feels like a dream until you're already walking in freedom. They passed the first guard post. Then the second. Still no one saw them. No swords drawn. No shouting. Just quiet steps in the middle of the night. The iron gate opened by itself. Read that again, it opened by itself. Some doors don't require force, they require obedience. When God says move, you move even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. Peter followed the angel, dazed but willing. That's the kind of trust that breaks the rules of fear. You don't have to understand the map to walk with the guide. Faith doesn't always feel strong, it just keeps walking. And suddenly, the angel left. Just like that. No goodbye. No final words. The miracle ended and Peter was alone, but free. Isn't that how God works sometimes? He delivers us, not to make us dependent on angels, but to show us that freedom was always his idea. Peter looked around and realized, this wasn't a vision. This was real. The same cell that held him captive now held nothing but memory. He wasn't just out of prison, he was out of fear. The night had shifted. Not because he prayed hard enough, but because God decided, not tonight. He ran to the house where the believers were gathered, probably praying for him at that very moment. Can you imagine knocking at the door of your own miracle? And then being left outside because they didn't believe it was you? That's what happened. Rhoda, a young servant girl, saw him at the door and left him standing there while she ran back to tell the others. They said, "It must be his angel." Sometimes people can't process answered prayer, because they're still rehearsing the worst-case scenario. But Peter kept knocking. Because when you've walked through the impossible, you don't need others to validate it. They finally opened the door and chaos followed. Joy. Disbelief turned into dancing. The room exploded. Not because they planned it, but because God wrote a plot twist in the middle of a tragedy. That's what he does. He waits until hope is thin, strength is gone, and the script seems final. Then he rewrites everything in a whisper. Peter is here. For words that turned mourning into morning. This wasn't just about Peter. It was a message to the early church. I still answer. I still intervene. And I still show up at midnight. Maybe tonight you feel chained. Not by metal, but by anxiety, shame, or exhaustion. Maybe you're surrounded by guards, pressures, deadlines, people who don't see your worth. You've prayed. You've cried. You've accepted your sentence. But listen closely, God is not done. If Peter can sleep through death row and wake up in freedom, then maybe this night isn't about your end. Maybe it's about your beginning. And maybe, Just maybe, angels are already walking toward your prison, light in hand, whispering, "Get up. Quickly." So what do you do when the night feels final? You rest, you trust, and you listen. Because divine interruptions rarely come with warning. They come with purpose. You may not see the light yet, but heaven isn't blind to your cell. There's still time for the story to shift. There's still power in whispered prayers. You don't need the whole plan, just one touch. Just one word. Just one knock on your door. And when it happens, don't be surprised if you're the one standing on the outside, free and smiling, while others try to catch up with your miracle. You know what's easy? Believing that your cell defines your future. Believing that silence means God stopped speaking. Believing that unanswered prayers mean unheard hearts. But what if the silence is sacred? What if the delay isn't denial, but design? Peter didn't kick the door down. He didn't scream for help. He didn't try to manipulate the outcome. He rested. He slept while others panicked. And that sleep became the seedbed of the supernatural. So if you find yourself surrounded by walls you can't climb, remember, stillness is not weakness. It's a signal that you trust the one who works while you wait. There are moments in life when the rescue won't look like what you imagined. You prayed for clarity, and God gave you peace. You prayed for a breakthrough, and He gave you rest. You prayed for quick answers, and He gave you quiet assurance. It doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes heaven answers with a whisper, a moment, a movement too gentle to notice at first. But when you look back, you'll see, something did shift. Something opened. Something fell. And you're not where you were. That's the miracle. Not that you shouted your way out, but that grace carried you quietly through. You might be wondering, why didn't God stop Peter from getting arrested in the first place? Why let him suffer? Why wait so long? And honestly, I don't know all the reasons. But I do know this, God let it happen so that when the light broke through, no one could take credit. Not Peter. Not the believers. Not the guards. Just Him. Sometimes God doesn't stop the fire. He walks with you through it. Sometimes He doesn't prevent the chains. He just makes sure they don't hold forever. And when the moment comes, He writes a story so powerful, it echoes through generations. Think about it. If Peter had been freed too soon, the church wouldn't have gathered to pray. If the chains had broken earlier, the testimony wouldn't have been as loud. There's beauty in the timing of God. Not rushed. Not delayed. Just divine. So if your miracle hasn't shown up yet, don't assume it's not coming. It may just be waiting for the moment it will shine the brightest. Remember, God doesn't write stories to impress crowds. He writes to transform hearts. And sometimes, that transformation needs the silence to settle deep before the answer arrives. Peter's story is more than a miracle, it's a pattern. A reminder that even when you're bound, you're not forgotten. Even when you're surrounded, you're not alone. Even when the door is locked, the author of the story still holds the key. You are not your prison. You are not your fear. You are not the sum of what has happened to you. You are a living story in the hands of a God who loves midnight plot twists. So keep knocking. Keep praying. Keep sleeping in peace if that's all you have energy for. God moves best in the quiet hours. Maybe tonight your heart feels too heavy to hope. Maybe you're not asking for a miracle anymore, just for the pain to pause. Friend, you're seen. You're heard. And even if you don't feel it yet, there is light forming on the edge of your darkness. The same God who stepped into Peter's prison is still stepping into the places people have forgotten. Into mental prisons, emotional cells, silent bedrooms where tears fall without witnesses. He sees all of it, and He is not far. He never was. If you've ever felt like the world forgot you, like even your prayers got lost in the mail, let this story remind you, God never loses track of His own. He times His answers to perfection. Not 1 second too soon. Not 1 second too late. He may not rush, but He's never absent. And when He comes, it won't just be a rescue. It'll be a revelation of His power, of His tenderness, of His refusal to let darkness win. Don't give up at midnight, because it's often the moment right before everything changes. So tonight, if your heart is heavy, breathe. Let this be your stillness. Let this story be your signal that you are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. The cell is not the end. Sometimes all it takes is one silent shift from heaven, and chains fall, doors open, and everything that held you begins to tremble. He still answers. He still breaks through. He still sends angels into impossible places. And your story, it's not over. It's being rewritten in the dark, with light that no prison can contain. At Midnight Psalms, we believe in the God who works while the world sleeps. The God of silent rescues, of sudden light, of whispered deliverance. If this story touched something inside of you, stay with us. There are more stories, more nights like this, more moments when heaven breaks in softly but surely. You don't have to believe alone. This is your space, your night, your reminder that someone still answers when you call, even if all you have is a whisper. Before you go, maybe just pause for a moment. Breathe in, exhale the fear. And if you feel led, share this with someone who's still in their prison. Someone who needs the reminder. We're not just telling stories here. We're lighting candles in the dark, one soul at a time. Subscribe if you want more midnight hope. And let this be your soft benediction tonight. Even in the silence, you are surrounded. Even in the dark, you are seen. And even in the waiting, He is already walking toward you.